Welcome to the Mycelium Network podcast, a podcast all about early stage web developers and the mentors and teachers that helped them along the way. Hey, Alvin. Thank you so much for joining me today on this Thursday. I'm always supposed to be a bit of track of time this week. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure. So, as I start with all my guests, I'm not going to tell your story. I think you can do it better than I can. So instead of that, I'm going to give you the floor and take as much time as you need. As always, say, go as far back into your history as you'd like and bring us up to the current day and just tell us a bit more about you.
For sure. So, hey, I'm Alvin. I've been in the industry for a while. Primarily, I worked as a front-end type person. So I was always driven by the same idea of like, how can I make like things that look, and feel nice to the user so that, whether it's, beautiful, fun, entertaining. And that took like a few forms, I guess. Like I worked on games, I worked on data visualizations, I worked on most recently design systems. And now my a new sort of turn in my career is I've been since the month of May this year, so about 4 or 5 months, developer advocate at Contentful.
Cool. Yeah, I like the design systems angle. I wonder if you want to dig into that a little bit, because I know that is something that I'm pretty passionate about. At a couple of clients that I was at, they were playing very fast and loose with their brand. And it's not, it's not their fault. It's that there isn't any structure. But then if you approach them with this idea of a design system, they're a little hesitant because they're like, how much time is this going to take? I was like,
always, yeah. What's the value of it?
Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time, but just let me paint you a picture of the future and what it might be like once you have this thing in place. Do you want to dig in a little bit more into design systems and like what they are, and maybe even try and answer some of those questions?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, what interested me in design system is that it's the place where like developers and designers are like have to collaborate, right? It's like, and that's always been the sweet spot for me, where like, the more design driven something is, usually the more I like it. And I found that like design systems were this, but for, at the larger scale, so as much as I wasn't interested in like very large, complex front ends, that had lots of like moving parts with like, 50 people working on something. A design system, on the other hand, is much more interesting because you have your designers and your developers working together in making something, right? And that was always the cool thing for me. In terms of, again, like application for like the brand, when the design system is it's well put together, it's just really satisfying when you can like create a sub page or a landing page really quickly because you're just putting blocks together and then you're like, okay, I've got the boring bits done. And now I can focus on the more like bespoke, interactive, interesting things. Because otherwise, if you're always sort of trying to find the same nav and like the same sort of sub menu or whatever, and you're having to code that or just lift and shift that in the standard way, you could just waste a bunch of time like recoding the same things. And whereas if you have like everything that's ready, you could just say, okay, put the blocks together, boom, nav, boom, headings. Everything has the right font size, the right spacing. You don't have to peer into Figma too much or Sketch or whatever, but everything's already done for you. So everything is kind of neat and tidy very quickly. But the bespoke bit that you need, then you have more time for it. Did that make any sense?
100%. No, I 100% agree. I think that is one of the big things about the design system. Because it's not just the design, it's also the components that comes out of the design. And those are actual living, breathing pieces of code that you can then compose together. And I think maybe React was the framework that really started making front-end people think about components. But I mean, now it's in everything. It's literally baked into the web platform. We have web components. It's in the name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the next evolution is, what do they call them? Design tokens. I think that's the next evolution of design systems.
Yeah.
And this ability to cross-share design tokens between systems like Figma, Penpot, and then like your development environment, where you literally export like a JSON definition and you have these tools that can take that and generate code. I used this one from Adobe where basically you have that, and then you can tell it like generate me the style sheets for, I put it in quotes because it's more than just style sheets, for web, iOS, Android, blah blah,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
all from this single
Yeah.
JSON
All
thing,
done.
and then
Yeah.
once the designers make the changes in Figma, say for example, and they export the latest version, it like just does like a automatic rebuild,
Propagates. Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to that being more of a thing. It's still early days there. There's very at this point, it's kind of you have to do quite a bit of hacking to get it to work really efficiently. But I'm looking forward to the future of what that can be.
Yeah.
So I noticed a post that you wrote called "Learning to Code in a Time of Crisis." I love the title. It intrigues me, so I automatically want to know more. And I think that probably ties into one of the other questions I often ask, which is, what advice do you have for early stage web developers or developers in general on how to stay motivated?
Right. So I'm going to start with like the post, the blog post, learning to code in time of crisis first, and then I'll sort of find advice from that. So my idea with this post, which was interesting because I started writing it in 2020 in March, when the whole world shut down. We know what happened. I had a couple of people ask me whether it was easy to find a job as a coder, and like if it was something they could break into. So I started writing it, started outlining it, and then I got I wasn't super happy with it, and I sort of shelved it because, as you know, in 2021 the economy kicked back again. Then we had this boom in tech, which seemed was going to last forever, but it didn't. In 2022, the economy is in a pickle again. And I had also another person ask me the same question, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna finish it, find another angle to it, and that's what I did. So the blog post has a couple of things in it. The first main point is the job market sucks right now. if you're trying to break into it as a beginner. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, and you just want to be realistic with it. It's like, even if you heard these stories maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, of people going from zero to great coding job in 3-6 months, it may happen to you again, but it's just less likely. So just got to be realistic with the state of the tech market right now. That doesn't mean, as I said, it's impossible, but just want to be realistic. So that's like with the negatives. With the positives, though, the great thing is the tech industry is used to people coming from a variety of backgrounds, and going from the most random jobs to coding. I think I have a bunch of examples there, but yeah. So it's not a foreign thing to do. It's not to say that there's zero elitism in the tech industry. It exists like everywhere, but we're used to people jumping from different careers, so we will not be looked at weirdly, or if you think your case is really unusual, like, oh, but I don't know, I'm coming from this very specific background. There's probably someone else who did something similar. So that's one part. And also with developers in particular and designers too, remote work is definitely a thing now. So if you think about it in a way that if you're looking for a job, you have access to companies. Of course, you can go as far as you want, on the entire planet. Some people work across, multiple time zones and everything. But even within your own country, right? Even if you think, okay, just within my own country, I have access, I can apply to pretty much any company there. Not any, but like a ton of companies there who do remote work. That's a huge advantage compared to whatever job, if you're a nurse or something that needs you to move your life around. What about your partner? What about your children? And that's amazing. I mean, there's tons of companies that work across countries, across time zone. Like you in South Africa, you're in the same time zone as Germany, for example. So you could work with a German company like me, right? But even if you think at the smaller scale of okay, just my own country, that's already a huge advantage. And so there are good and there's bad, and it's still a good thing to learn. But just be realistic that the market is weird at the moment.
Yeah. What do you think is weird about it? Do you think it's that maybe um, the opportunities that exist require a certain amount of experience, and that is the problem for early stage folks, is they lack that experience. And so while there might be a shortage of skills, it's more a shortage of skills of experienced developers, not so much new developers. Or do you think companies are hesitant towards hiring juniors?
M- the problem right now is that there were a ton of layoffs. So you have a huge pool of experienced coders that are on the market. So that's the problem. Like if you have one opening, you'll probably get the most experience because you can, right? Because there was all these layoffs happening, you know. But again, like it depends. Like it doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just harder than it used to be when you had more of an equal distribution of like people of all levels entering the market. Now you had like this ton of layoffs. You have a ton of people with experience that are being dumped to the markets looking for jobs at the same time. So it's harder. But I just hope it will, balance out in the near future. But yeah, that at least, in the summer, like since, just for people listening to this in the future, since the spring of 2022, we had basically nonstop big layoffs happening all the time.
Yeah.
So, and we're recording this in September, so early October. So, in the past 4 months, it's been nonstop. Company X, laid off 1,000 tech workers. Company B laid off 500. Like, so it's just really hitting it hard. But, I hope it will balance out. But as you said, there's still a shortage of like developers. People are still struggling to find them. So it's not gonna. So that's not gonna disappear. And more as we know, technology is eating our lives. And so I don't see that stopping. But yeah, the market conditions are a bit weird at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't think about that. That's a very good insight. So with that challenge, I think already for early stage developers and people switching careers and stuff like that, it's already stressful, a little scary. And now you have this added thing that you just mentioned, where it's like, oh, now I'm competing against somebody with 5 years experience. I'm stuffed. How would you, any advice on how to stay motivated and, just keep going, keep trying, don't give up?
For sure. Yeah. I think, keep at it, as you said, and be consistent. Even if so it's a bit of a weirdly worded way of saying it, but like keep at it, be consistent, even if you'll see inconsistency like everything else, because like learning everything, your progress will not be linear. So like it's like like learning a musical instrument or anything. Like sometimes you're gonna make a ton of progress in a couple of weeks, and then you'll really struggle for like 3 or 4, and then it's gonna go up and down like this. And it's not easy, and my own personal failure to be any good at any musical instrument can attest to that. So somehow with coding it worked. I guess with coding maybe it's easier to see progress because you can visually see your programs becoming more complicated, whereas maybe with a musical instrument you're just getting a little bit faster. Maybe I'm just making excuses, doesn't matter. So going back to the word of advice, keep at it. It will be inconsistent. And keep the end goal in mind and have it, have an achievable like end goal. So if you think, okay, I want to build up a portfolio of work that includes project X, make sure you have that in mind and you keep thinking, okay, I'm moving towards that goal, rather than just like have this abstract thing like I'm going to learn Python, yes, but it's very easy to fizzle out when you have like a goal like this, just like learn Python, like what does that mean?
Yeah. I'm definitely a very goal-oriented person. I've mentioned it in previous episodes of the podcast. I find it very difficult to learn something for the sake of learning it. I always need an outlet for it. Like I need, either something I can contribute to that uses the technology I'm learning so I can like apply what I learn, or just scratch on my own itch, or even make up my own little project, even if it's like just for me. Just as a means of using the skills I'm learning. If I feel I'm just like making the little food app that you're doing as part of the course. It doesn't feel as fulfilling to me. And because a lot of the courses feed off each other, which is good. It's like music where, you know, the music you make today is influenced by the music from the past. And so sometimes you'll hear a band and you'll say, I hear a little bit of Rolling Stones in there, but mixed with a little bit of Beatles. It's good. I mean, it's good. It's I heard, I don't know, the artist Grimes. I listened to an interview with her. I'm not a fan of her music or anything, but she's a very fascinating person. And she says, music is like having a conversation with those who came before you. And I think that was really just beautiful. And so, yeah, I think the same thing here. I do think it's good that these course materials are feeding off each other and improving through that. But maybe they should look at expanding the portfolio of examples you build. So it's not like you're building just another food app, another to-do app, because that can get tedious. I wanted to jump into a different problem now. I'm thinking if I should first flip to a different topic or we should just keep going. I think let's just keep going down this road. So I think you've highlighted some of these things, but maybe we can dig into it more. From your perspective, what do you think are the biggest problems in the tech industry?
Yeah, so I don't generally don't like thinking at like absolute statements like their biggest, but I think a big problem we have that is recognized still is diversity, even though we've improved a lot. Don't get me wrong, the tech workforce of today looks nothing like the tech workforce of 5, 6, 7 years ago. Like really improved a lot in that regard. But it's still a problem. Like we still know we need to have more diverse voices, and it kind of feeds off with what we were talking about with having people from different backgrounds, right? The more we have people that come in with a fresh eye, from like a random job before, the better our product is going to be, right? And so this is something that the tech industry knows there's a problem and we're trying to fix it, but we're aware that there's still a problem. And then, like, coming back, I guess, to what we were saying, this is also where it's interesting, where people would hire you because you're talking as a beginner. Because when you were talking about, like, earlier about, well, how the hell do I compete with someone who has 5 years? But maybe even if you don't have as many actual years, maybe there's something about your background and about yourself and about the way you see design and accessibility that is unique to you, and someone who's been working on a very specific thing for 5 years cannot contribute to the company and the product. So that also is, I guess, like a beacon of hope, I guess, for people trying to break into the industry.
Yeah. I think that leads me to a different topic also, which is interviews. And I think there is where we have another problem with tech. And I think this one might be very tech specific. I think generally the diversity problem is not just a tech problem. It's very visible in tech, and it's been made very visible, and that's good. I mean, it needs to be visible before anybody's going to do anything about it. It's like we saw with COVID, like when it was very visible that we have a problem, like the world rallied around it. So that's important. But I think the other side with the interviews is if you take a junior through the same interview process as somebody with 5 years experience, generally the person with 5 years experience are going to win every time. Because if you don't ask those questions, like what you said, like, what do you bring to the project that's unique? If you don't dig into that side of it and you just focus on the whiteboard algorithm things, the junior is going to lose that interview every time. And I can see how that can be demotivational. So I think with tech interviews, the one thing that we need to, but I think this is also a little bit, I don't want to be the person who always puts the burden on the other person and like give the recruiters an out. But I do think as an applicant to a job, you need to you need to speak to those things. You need to speak to what you can bring, not just from a technical perspective, but from how you think about stuff. And I think one of the previous folks I spoke to, Adelson Sandoval, he made a point of that, like how important it is to understand the company that you're applying to, understanding their technology, and maybe even coming to the table with some ideas, because you've taken the time to research what the company does, what their goals are. And it's easier, of course, if the company has an open source aspect to them, because you can literally see the code, you can literally see what they do, and through that you might see some stuff. But I think also, just in general, companies should be open to the idea that a junior can bring something to the table that a senior might not, even if it's just in the way that they're going to ask questions about stuff that other people have stopped thinking about because it feels like it's just part of your DNA now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of hiring juniors. I think there's lots of values in that someone with fresh eyes. That's what it is really, and that has a ton of value. Especially I feel like when you're especially if you have, your company, if the same kind of people have been building the same product for a while, it's hard to see what's going on with fresh eyes. And coming back to what you said about maybe not liking to always sort of throw the burden to someone else, but the someone else is us though. It's developers when we're hiring others, right? It's like when you have an opening in your team, it's us knowing, do we really want to give them a 4-hour take-home test? Do we really need that? It's it's us pushing back. Or something I'm also a big advocate of is if we do think, because it's a more senior position or whatever, that, a 3-hour take-home test is the way to go, then pay the person, right? It's but yeah, I feel like it's on us developers, thinking in terms of recruiting. It's not just the recruiters, it's how we word our job description as well. Do we need to have so much there's even internal jargon sometimes. Sometimes I see this and it's we're part of the, I don't know, Prometheus group within Facebook or whatever, and I'm like, what the hell is a Prometheus group? Why do I care as an applicant? And it's sometimes you see things like this, and yeah, it's on us to make sure that we're always super keen to share our job posting on LinkedIn and whatever, and be come work with me, and I do that too. Don't get me wrong, but it's also on us to make sure that the job description we share makes sense. And that, we have our hiring process nailed, and we're not oh, what are we doing? Oh, I don't know. Let's give him a 3-hour code home test. What? I don't know. Let's do a to-do list in Svelte. Yay. But then when you're an applicant, if you have 3 companies giving you that, it starts to add up, and it's, that's it. It starts to add up, and it starts to be annoying. Whereas if it's more okay, we're just gonna come on Zoom for an hour, have them, walk through code, or just do a simple code example of hey, can you fetch something from the GitHub API, walk us through it, something like that. That's a way, in my opinion, that's a way better interview process, right? Because you're not requiring a ton of commitment. You're still looking at how the person is coding, but you're not placing this huge burden on them to find 3 hours spare time and polish an app and do whatever. And again, that multiply by every company you're applying to, right? So yeah, I feel like it's on us as developers with a bit of experience who are gonna be in the position to hire someone else, to make sure that our process is as accessible as it can be.
Yeah, that's very good. I wonder with that hour-long interview where you do something, would you give somebody a hint as to what the question might be? You don't necessarily will tell them you're going to be using the GitHub API, but maybe you'll tell them we're going to have this hour-long conversation, and basically as part of that, we'll have you do a request to an API to get some data and display it on a web page.
Yeah.
Would you put that in?
I think it depends on, again, the seniority level, how what kind of things you're solving. Because, for example, sometimes you're more interested in the presentation, right? So you're okay, we'll give you with that same example, right? So you can be really interested in how someone writes the tests for this request to the API. That could be like a primary focus, or it could be, yeah, just get something from this API. But what we really want you to focus on is make sure I don't know if you have a search or something, or the whatever you're displaying from the API, make sure that it's accessible. So it really depends what you're looking for in the role. But yeah, I think like you drop hints based on what you're trying to have them like focus on, versus like, if it's a pure front end, then you want someone who really knows about accessibility, and it's something that they've said in their CV as well. You don't want them to spend 20 minutes like figuring out there's a missing header to that API or whatever. You could just help them with that, because that's not the primary thing.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds like a very healthy approach. I really like that. I'd be great if more people did that, more companies. That's good. I'm glad you've said that, and now it's out there for people to like listen to and like
for sure
take notes. This leads us into this next question, which is, I noticed a tweet from you about Cascadia.js, and they mentioned that they post all the recordings of their events because they believe in open sourcing knowledge. Love that, by the way. And so I wonder, what are your thoughts with regards to open source, the open source ecosystem and its role in developer education? Because especially I think it touches on that topic previously, which we talked about juniors' lack of experience, lack of working experience. Like, can open source play a role here?
For sure. There's so as you mentioned before, like with open source, what's great is you can see real code, right? You can see if someone has a small project, they open source it. You can see, okay, this is how this specific app works. So I can like, it allows you to explore and like to see real code in action, which is great. Especially now with things like Netlify and Vercel, like it's a lot easier to host things than it was before. Because before it was like, oh, I have to do whatever. So people tend to just have a GitHub, and that just automatically publishes to a Netlify or something, and it makes it easier to say, oh, okay, I got this code and it's powering this page. And there's like no in between. This is the build step. It's all in there and it's all visible. So that's great. I feel like in terms of developer education, though, we now have more of a curation problem than number of resources problem. Like I feel like there's ton of knowledge and it's fantastic. We're extremely lucky that we have tons of people like writing tutorials in their spare time on their blogs and stuff. So there's a lot of knowledge going around. But we might have more of a, as I said, like curation problem, in that we need to figure out how to triage like all the tutorials and everything to make sure, okay, this is what I need to build a specific thing. But yeah, otherwise, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I think Riku from the very first podcast said you feel like you're this little drop that fell into this ocean and you don't know whether you should swim up or down or left or right.
Yeah.
Because you're like drowning in information. I think we are there. And I think one of the projects that we're undertaking as part of the Mycelium network is the web workbook, which is not meant to be, let's try and do a better MDN. No, it's the opposite. It's let's curate content, and let's define pathways, topics, technology paths, and let's as a community share things that have helped us, and let's try and make it easier for people to know, okay, I've finished this part, where do I go from here? What are the content that I can trust? Who are the people I should be following that shares really good, that has a teaching style that works really well? And also finding different ways of learning, because not everybody likes to read, not everybody likes to watch a video. Some people like me are very, very practical, so you want something that has a practical aspect to it. So kind of trying to curate stuff around topics, technologies, and pathways. It's a big undertaking, but I think I'm hearing it more and more and more that this is what is needed. Like speaking to early stage developers, it's almost, I don't think I've spoken to one that has not said this. So the fact that you also brought it up is just like, it's clear that that is something that's needed, and I'm really excited about that project. But it's still early days, and there's a lot to do, a lot of planning. There's a lot of planning, and I think that's one of the things that is interesting about people who get into code is they don't realize how big a part of the job that is planning. Um, sure, you're going to write a lot of code probably, but you're also going to spend a lot of time planning before you write all the code. A friend of mine, Peter, has the famous thing where he says, writing the code's the easy part. Understanding the problem and finding a solution, that is the hard part. And then it's almost like you take your crypt notes and you just turn it into code. Um, it's oversimplified, of course, but I like the statement. I like the way he phrases it. Yeah, that's really cool. So another thing that I saw about you, and it makes me think that you are somebody, and I in that same camp, that like ethical tech or like are passionate about ethical tech. You mentioned on the rise of Signal. I use Signal myself. I've used it before the the WhatsApp debacle, but I kind of still used WhatsApp at that point because some of the family and things were on there. You know, that's the common problem. But like I've gotten off all of that stuff. I've just decided that for me personally, I need to put my money where my mouth is. That's not entirely correct, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I'd like to hear your views on what you think about ethical tech and its role in improving the tech world and the world, maybe even in general.
Yeah. So so you're talking about the blog post that I wrote as well about, like, again, the rise of Signal, and my thesis there was that when Signal got the spotlight, it already had all the ingredients to succeed. Basically, it had roughly the same features of WhatsApp. It was already a polished product. Because the problem you have with more ethical tech in general, and you could think of this as in the broadest sense possible, of like, it's more ethical because it's open source, because it's there, it doesn't have like a giant weird company behind it or whatever. So the problem we have usually with this type of tech is that it's just not as good. Like, it doesn't have like the same level of visual flair or whatever than the mainstream thing. So people are kind of stuck with the old thing because the usability is not right. And when Signal had its moment, it's what I put in the article as well. It had a big boost because Elon Musk tweeted just 2 words: use Signal, right? And it's credited with suddenly all the newspapers were talking about it, and he already has a huge account, but people also retweeted it to hell. But my thesis was, if he had tweeted use Linux, no one would care, because Linux is not there yet in terms of I can just flip a button and suddenly I have a perfect, I have the same thing, I have the same apps, everything looks great, and it's very easy to install. I know I might get some heat from Linux users from this, but it's not as easy as just like a Mac. Things are not as intuitive. Again, there's lots of progress being made there. I don't want to undermine that. This also got a lot more accessible than it was.
Yeah.
In the if you're talking about Linux even 10 years ago, or even worse, in the 2005-ish, it was impossible. You had to go into the command line thing to install whatever. But so it's getting better, but we still have ways to go. And that was the idea of the blog post about ethical tech in general. To me, it's usually when what you want in tech is to, as much as possible, is for incentives to be aligned, right? So to give you a counter example, that's not the case with social media, right? They have no incentive to, I'm not going to name a specific company, but they have no incentive to make media that's actually that is social. What they want to do is is for you to stay on the platform for as long as possible, because you can see more ads, right? And they do this with by creating outrage, fear, whatever, controversy. And that's not by making a media that makes people sociable and people want to interact. Because if you just see some funny good vibe things for 10 minutes and you leave, that's not what they want. It's not in their interest, right? So as a result, the incentives are completely misaligned. Whereas I'm gonna use the example of another company that I like. And I think I can start to recommend because they're starting to be as good as the alternative, like with Proton Mail, for example. Like they're all about like building an email that's private. The day they are caught selling ads, every one of their customer will leave. So they have, their interests are aligned with what they're preaching to be, right? It's like we want to make a private email, so as a result, we know they can sell data or they can be hacked. Because the day that happens, they know they're going to lose like 50% of their customers at least. And again, like using the example of Proton Mail, like if we had this conversation 2 years ago, I would not be able to recommend Proton Mail to you because they didn't have a calendar. Like, it didn't have like things like dark mode. It still looked a little bit clunky. Like if you received again a Google Calendar invite, you couldn't do anything with it. Now you could just press the same button that you have in Gmail. It says, yes, I would like to attend. Boom, you press that and that's it. So it's a similar enough experience that it's an alternative that's ethical and good, right? It's like you're not losing too much by like switching to the ethical product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's another case happening right now with Penpot and Figma.
So yeah, that's exactly
Figma
right.
Yeah, Figma was bought by Adobe. A lot of people are not happy about that.
To say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. And I mean, and I think it's a complicated one because it's not like Figma is not a good fit for Adobe as a company. It is the history of Adobe and what they've done to products that they've purchased. That's the scary part here. And even though the CEO of Figma said that, no, we're going to operate as an independent company and make our own decisions, but we do get access to all of this power of Adobe that they've developed over the years. It sounds good, but I don't know how true that really is.
Yeah, and, right. But that's what everyone thinks. Is like, yeah, sure, yeah, you got 20 billion for sure.
Yeah, sure, you'll say this, yeah. And then yesterday I saw Penpot announced they have an $8 million investment seed round, which means their blog post literally said our time has come, and I'm really excited about that. And I have personally started using the two tools in tandem because, like you said, when the WhatsApp thing happened, Signal had all the ingredients to just take its place. Penpot is close, but not quite there. Like I found some bugs which I'm raising. Like this is open source. It's awesome. I can just go and tell them this is the thing I'm seeing, and even maybe I can even help fix the problem. Because currently, if I drag an SVG into it and some of the elements has color, all the color disappears, and they either render them invisible or white, or it renders it as all black, and then you have to go in and edit it in Penpot. So there's a bug there. But then the other thing that I miss badly is auto layout. That is not in Penpot yet, and that is a big feature. And then I think the community plugin stuff, that the ecosystem that Figma has built, that's something that's missing as well. But with them having this $8 million investment and being open source and having a community that's now like, yeah, we need to support this project, I think all these gaps can be filled very, very quickly, and they are going to be filled very, very quickly. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm definitely following that and seeing how I can help make Penpot be the successor of Figma. But with Proton Mail, I've been actually toying with that idea because I did see their announcement when they're like, now we have a VPN, we have a Drive kind of thing like Google Drive, we have calendaring, we have better, our email is better. And I tried it for a bit and it looks beautiful. And it has some functionality actually that Gmail doesn't. And the company I run called Mechanical Inc., I'm in a stage where I'm trying to define what I want the company to be, because I don't want it to be another agency. I don't want that.
Right.
At the moment, it kind of is because it pays the bills, right? But that is not the long-term thing. What I want it to be is a company that is heavily involved in open source and in ethical civic tech. And I need to find a way to be able to do that while creating job opportunities and being able to sustain my own me and my family and my children. Um, but as part of that, I mean, cards on the table, I use Google Workspace, right, for my company stuff. And I'm considering switching to Proton because it with what my future vision for the company is, I need to again put my money where my words are, and say I'm not going to use Google's product for this. I'm going to use an alternative, an ethical alternative, because one does exist, and only use tools that don't fit that bill when there really isn't an alternative. And then asking the question, is there a way that Mechanical Ink and the communities I build can help create this ethical alternative, or plant the seeds so that people can come together and create these ethical alternatives. Um, wow, that was fun to talk about.
Yeah, right.
So, in the same kind of vein, has there been any person, book, event, anything like this that was impactful in your life, just in general, or maybe tech specific?
Mm. Yeah. Just to wrap up what we said about like ethical tech, I think an important point too is that it doesn't have to be a full cold turkey switch right now. Like where you're talking about, like with Penpot, for example. Like right now, Figma hasn't changed, but we know that if 1 year something really bad happens, like what everybody is fearing, which is it's being integrated with the Creative Suite, which is what everyone is like, please don't make me install Creative Suite, right? But if that happens in a year, Penpot had a year from now, to get its act together. And it's kind of the same thing. You could say, okay, I'm looking at Proton right now, and maybe in a year I'll switch, right? And it's kind of the same thing for Penpot, for all these things. So it's important to know that to have them in your radar, to keep checking, as opposed to go, oh, let me see, can I do a cold turkey switch today? And you download it and it doesn't work and you forget about it forever. Like I've done that too. Like don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's a bit of an easy thing to go, because it's easier for your mind. You don't want to have this thing lingering of like, maybe I should switch to something one day. So it's easier to go one day, look at it and go, okay, right, is this the most optimal thing today? You look into it, it's like, nope, moving on. But you can say, okay, maybe let's check it in 6 months or a year, and you can and also as you're doing, like just sharing something, like they shipped something, like you're talking about your SVG bug. When they fix it, if you share it, that's it. It's like it's a little boost, even if you may not be using them already because of what you said, auto layout. To go back to your question about like, was there a person, or an event or something that really impacted my career? I think I will say like all the managers that gave me a chance, even if I didn't specifically fit like the profile. I did lots of various things. And I feel like it also comes back to what we were saying about like hiring people with a diverse skill sets and not necessarily the perfect background. It happened to me a few times. Like I was lucky that someone was like, even if you don't have the perfect previous experience, I feel like you'll be a good fit here in the team. And that happened more than once, and every time that really just helped me a lot. So
yeah,
props to that.
I love that. I love that when people are open to giving you a chance, and saying, let's see what you do, and then let's check back in a month. And if you show that you are a curious person who's willing to learn, let's keep going. I think companies need to be more open to that. So for, like I mentioned, this web workbook project, it's going to be very content heavy. And so we're going to be building it using Hugo as the like static site generators aspect of it. But then we've got a community license from Contentful. And so we intend to use Contentful for our CMS. So I've read quite a bit about Contentful, and I've used a bunch of other like ones like Netlify CMS, Forestry, and stuff like that. Can you talk to how Contentful is different? Like what sets Contentful apart from all these others? Because I know there's a lot of these things that's jumped up.
Yeah. So like that's the great thing about being a developer advocate and not a salesman, is that I don't have to give you a big sales pitch. What I'll say is Contentful, so as as you said, I'm glad you're going to be using us, but even if not, that's fine. So we're a headless content platform to help, that helps all kind of clients. So I think what I'll say is like the great thing about Contentful is like we've been at this for a while. Like it's quite it's I think one of the first companies in that space. In like having this idea of having something headless, having like blocks of content, rather than moving from the old paradigm of like this is a page, and like everything in WordPress, for example, is a page. So you're sort of with that structure, and you're hacking around with like short codes or whatever, and like with Contentful, we have these entries, which and content types, which can be anything you want, and that gives you the great flexibility. Yeah, I'm glad you're using
Yeah,
it.
well, I'm looking forward to it. Um, so I'm thinking about which way to go next. That's going to be. I think I want to switch on. I noticed that you mentioned you're a coach also at CodeBar. Um, I have not heard about CodeBar before, strangely enough, and I had a quick look at it. It looks interesting, but you know more about it than me, so I'm going to ask you to inform me about CodeBar, what you do there, and what their mission is, and stuff like that.
For sure. So I'm still a new coach too. So I started in about November, December of 2021 um, as a coach. So CodeBar is basically a series of meetups that historically before COVID happened in specific cities. So you have one in London, in Berlin, in New York, in Edinburgh. I think there's one in Paris too. Anyway, so in each of these cities, it's a meetup to help people learn to code. So people who are learning to code come in with their problem, which could be anything, and they're like, "Hey, can I get help?" And someone, a coach, will help them with that problem for 2 hours. And that could be anything. It could be, "Hey, I'm doing the free code camp. I'm stuck on chapter 3. I'm trying to load an image and it doesn't work." And you're like, "Okay, sure, we'll fix that." Or it could be something. Sometimes it's way more involved and like, "Hey, I already have this React app, but when I do this thing, I'm trying to query this thing and everything breaks." And it's like, "Okay, cool. Let's have a look at this." So, and they try to pair coaches with skills. So when people register in advance, they're like, "Hey, I need help with Python." And we're like, "Well, let's," and CodeBar tries to make sure that there's someone who knows Python in the room, which is easier. Even though you can usually figure it out because, as an experienced coder, especially if it's an easier problem, sometimes it works across languages, but CodeBar tried to optimize the coach, the coach's skills with, what the student needs. And historically, it was very much oriented towards like underrepresented people in the industry. The way I coach is on Discord and on Zoom. So you could just rock on to, I think it's pretty much open to any cities now. Like I've coached in Berlin, I've coached in London, even though I'm not in neither city, right? A bunch more people are happening a bunch more meetups are happening in person now. So I've been coaching less, plus also like other like engagements made it difficult. But yes, so that's the idea. That's
No,
CodeBar.
that sounds interesting. So it's almost like this group of mentors that is just available to you when you get stuck.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool.
And they try to pair one-to-one
nice.
all the time,
Wow.
at least. So sometimes you might get two students. It happens when there aren't enough coaches, but usually they're really good at making sure that if they got 10 students, that make sure we have 10 coaches.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm definitely going to have a look at that a bit more. That sounds like a good fit for our community, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to dig into something different. Maybe similar, maybe different. So when you announced that you were joining Contentful, you pinned a tweet. And part of that tweet is that you mentioned that this was after a long break. So it made me curious about what was the reason behind that long break. Because let me preface this by why I find that interesting. Like, I personally have had many struggles and continue to do with mental health in general, anxiety, things like this. And sometimes it gets to you. It drains you, it makes you tired, and you do feel like you need a break. Not always possible. Sometimes you have to grin and bear through it, but sometimes, you're either going to take that break or your body's going to force you to take that break in unpleasant ways. So I was curious, and I've spoken to other people also where burnout's been real. Like Ian Douglas is somebody I spoke to that almost quit tech because he was so burned out. So I was curious if maybe there are echoes of that in this story. So if you want to dig into that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm lucky. It's never been like a forced thing. I was getting tired. Like, I mean, let's be real. Like, the world is upside down and has been for 2 years, so that doesn't help. But yeah, I feel like I just wanted to change. So before, as I said in the intro, I was like a regular front end developer, and I wanted to become a developer advocate. So I applied to a bunch of places, and then luckily Contentful said yes, which was fantastic. And yeah, so in between leaving my old job, which was very hard, like I really liked my team and everything, but I felt like I needed to change. I was just getting a little tired of the whole thing. Like, like mental health wise, like it became harder. I feel like there probably, as you said, just like accumulation of the last 2 odd years. And that, so in between, I made sure to have some time off in between my last job at the Wall Street Journal and Contentful. So I had about 5 weeks ish between leaving my. I don't have the dates right, but like so about 5 weeks between. So it's not that long. It's long, especially if you compare it to like in America where they have like 2 weeks and that's it. That's it for the year. That's all you take off.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's long, but it's not extremely long. So and during those 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks again, I went on a big road trip around the UK, and it was fantastic. So yeah, that's how there was a really clean, may not be that long a break, but it was a very clean break because I almost didn't code for like 3 weeks, and it was just a complete change in like environment as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing that. So I think in closing, and this one leads kind of nicely into it, what do you enjoy doing outside of the tech world? I know a lot of times the answer is, I still do tech. If that's the case, that's fine. But I'm curious, like, what do you do when you're not doing tech?
Yeah. So there's, I mean, like everyone else, I really like traveling. I'm lucky that I get to do a lot more of that now as a developer advocate, which is fantastic. I like things to do with music, as I alluded to earlier with like my failure to be good at any musical instrument. So like playing it, listening to it, attending concerts. Another thing is, I guess, kind of like your answer a little bit, is that I just like learning about things on the internet in general. So it's not necessarily coding. Like I have a side project like everyone else. Let's not a lie there. Sometimes I have multiple, and it happens. But yeah, I just like getting into like random topics. Like I think for about like maybe about a year now, I've got really into like musical theater. And I just learned everything as much as I could about it, and like learning the history of it, how different like composers like relate to each other, and like just musically also was just extremely rich discovery. So like stuff like that I also really like, which is kind of like doing tech a little bit, but not exactly.
Yeah. What is it about travel that you enjoy?
I mean, it's a pretty, I guess, standard answer. Is like it takes you out of your environment, which is great. Also for like, it's for your mind and everything else. Like that's really good to to see other things, and it's just learning about like and seeing just how other cultures work, how every every country works. You also see a lot of blind spots, which is interesting. Of like stuff you didn't think about, and you come to another country, you're like, oh my god, they totally fixed it. Or like, oh my god, this thing is absolutely terrible in this country. How they like we figured this out 10 years ago. How come this country hasn't? Whatever. But like it goes both ways. And yeah, it's just really good for, you know, just your mind, and also just seeing different things, like, you know, and like seeing completely different nature and like different people, customs. It's just super interesting.
No, I agree. I wish it didn't have as much of an impact on our carbon footprints as it does, but I mean, sometimes you can find beauty and uniqueness within your own country, and you don't have to necessarily get on a plane. Not unless you're driving an electric car. It's not like cars don't have an impact on, but I think they have less of an impact, less of a carbon footprint than a big ass airplane. Oh, thank you so much, Alvin. This has been really a good conversation. I enjoyed it, and I'm kind of sad to have to end it a little early. Probably we could have probably kept going for a while, but yeah, I'm gonna be without electricity and internet for a while. So there's a problem that we haven't solved that a lot of other countries have solved.
Yep. Yep.
So, but yeah, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to speak with me. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to look into a lot of these things that you've mentioned, and I'll be following all your work on Twitter and Polywork and everywhere where you are. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, and happy to be on again. You know, happy to have another chat for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure, well, it's a huge pleasure. Thanks, Alvin. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mycelium Network podcast. If you're not already, please subscribe, star, and leave a review for us in your podcatcher of choice. This helps others find us and helps us make a better podcast for you, our listeners. You can also find and follow us on Twitter at Network Mycelium and join the community on Discord. All the links are available in the show notes.